Porky's Corner is proud to be sponsored by Spartan Site Solutions. They are specialists in civil engineering and demolition contracts for the construction industry. Interested parties should visit their website or contact Porky's Corner for a referral at porkycorner@mail.com.
Hello, you hardcores. Welcome to part 4. Yeah, it cut off the end of part 3. Julian. I think he spoke elegantly. Yeah, eloquently. Is that spelled? If I said that right? Yeah, he spoke well there about Gary Sykes. It's just a clerical error, isn't it, from board? Just a human error that they thought, nobody would be bothered about, but it does bother Gary Sykes and it does bother Julian. And what's right is right. Everybody knew it was a mandatory. Sign off on it and do your job. That's all you got to do. Sign off on it and do your job. And everything will be all right then. So, welcome back, Julian. Yeah, you were saying.
Yeah, sorry, mate. I was in full flight, wasn't I?
Yeah.
We just need a discussion, don't we, with Robert Smith, and we just need to understand a few things, because it's one thing keeping the coach in the dark, but if the boxer was in the dark, then that's the wrong thing, isn't it? And the board said they sent out communications, basically saying that Johansson wasn't mandatory, but the boxer never received those communications. And as far as I'm aware, that the manager, Chris Aston, didn't receive those either, because he believed it was a mandatory. Yeah. So, Kelly Maloney, what did you receive? And can we have a copy, please? And Robert Smith, I'm sure you've got this on file. We've been in a digital age for quite some time now. And we just need to understand that. And we need to understand if Johansson wasn't mandatory, why not? Because everybody else stepped out of the race. So there comes a time, doesn't there, when you say, right, Crawler's out, Truscott's out, Johansson's mandatory challenger.
Yeah, they've got to do the right thing. The funny thing is, obviously Gary's, for his talent and the effort he put in, he should have got more out of it, shouldn't he? Really?
Yeah, it was. Gary had lots of things going against him. It was also, first of all, he was from a small town in Dewsbury. So when Gary Sykes won the ABAs, he won the ABAs in the year when there was some big names won the ABAs. Now, it was when they used to do the point system, they awarded the point system. And Gary was dominant that year. He was on fire, and he wasn't being arrogant, because Gary's he's not an arrogant kid.
Yeah.
And the ABAs, he always said he thought the ABAs were quite easy. He thought it was really, really easy. And when he won his final match, I think he beat a kid called Luke Robinson in the final. He won it 22-3 on points, gave him 2 standing counts. It was so easy. Why am I telling you this? Was because at the time when Sykes was on fire and he was a dominant featherweight, at one point, and we're talking about open class boxing, at one point over 3 seasons, Gary Sykes went 34-0 in amateurs. Now, if you just think about that for a minute, 34-0 over 3 seasons, that's massively impressive. But he's also a junior ABA champion and a boys club champion. But people weren't jumping for Gary Sykes' signature. It was from a relatively unknown boxing club, Cleckheaton Boxing Academy. he was from the town Dewsbury. You've visited Dewsbury, everybody knows it's classed as an area of deprivation. So whilst people said Sykes was always popular, the reality is he wasn't that popular. The most tickets he ever sold was about 200. Now, this was when he was a British champion, by the way, against Gary Buckland. So he wasn't massively popular. So he didn't get huge ticket sales. You know, ticket sellers, someone who sells 600, 700, 800 tickets on the debut, that's a ticket seller. Sykes wasn't a ticket seller. So, you know, he didn't have the most fanfare when he turned pro. And by such, he had to take risks like prize fighter and various other things because he was earning hardly any money. He wasn't big news. He was shut away on the Friday fight nights in sports centres, fighting in British title fights. And he had a lot of bad luck. He obviously had the Adrian Broner fight, it was cancelled on him. Various things happened to him, but were pretty unlucky. He had a lot of fighters pull out against him. And he just didn't have a lot of luck. And he just deserves it. He was an outright winner of the Lonsdale belt, and for whatever reason, I repeat myself, and I'll never stop talking about this. But anybody who doesn't know we'll post the links, and you can have a look at the evidence. But it's a disgraceful decision. And
we've seen it. Me, you, Kent's seen it, Annie, Richard.
Yeah, everyone's seen it.
Terry, we all know about it, don't we? What's gone on?
Just get.
And most of it, nearly about 80% of it's already out there in Maine, isn't it? Apart from
Robert Smith, central area, border control, no mudslinging, no longer a license holder. Protested this decision and handed my license in after 20 years. But ultimately, right, it's about doing right. Review the case, review the situation, right, and just let's step through it. Help us understand. If not, why not? And if we have to live with it, we have to live with it. But you know you got it wrong. You know you got it wrong. And if it's, I'll repeat and I'll re-stress the situation. If it's a case of you haven't got the funds, we'll raise the funds, but you have to put it right in the history books and on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And the irony, I've just said that. The irony is, if you look on Wikipedia, the Gary Sykes Carl Johansson fight, it lists Carl Johansson as a mandatory challenger.
Yeah, so why don't they
Wikipedia's got that from somewhere, haven't they?
It was magazine, wasn't it? Boxing News.
Boxing News, Wikipedia, lots of online.
It's everywhere except in Robert Smith's bank account, taking that money out to get that belt made.
I've got a link to what says Frank Maloney's promoter and Frank Maloney's manager, who was the same. Carl Johansson's manager and promoter was the same. Frank Maloney was officially Carl Johansson's manager. And I've got a report, an article that says he insisted that Johansson was mandatory. I've got a report that says that. I've got a report that quotes Mick Marsden as saying, we've lost out our opportunity to fight Sykes now because we tried to go the voluntary route. We stepped out of the eliminator against Carl Johansson, and we understand now that we've missed out, and that Carl Johansson, we understand, is the mandatory challenger. So Mick Marsden's a very, very respected manager in boxing. And Mick Marsden's quoted that. So if all these newspaper articles and online articles are wrong, why didn't people correct that then? Everybody thought,
can't they? Because the noses are in the trough.
Everybody thought Johansson was a mandatory challenger, including the fighter, the trainer, the manager, us, Team Sykes, the whole lot. We all thought that was the case. Even an unnamed senior person from the central area who came to collect the belt from Sykes said to myself and Gary and another coach, I thought he'd won it outright. We thought he'd won it outright. We are surprised we're having to pick it up, but we've had instructions from head office to pick up the belt because we have been told that Johansson wasn't mandatory. So the central area thought that was the case.
Yeah.
Johansson's representative thought that was the case. We thought that was the case. It was reported on various online and newspaper articles that was the case. Mick Marsden, the manager of Paul Truscott, thought that was the case. Paul Truscott thought that was the case. Everybody thought Carl Johansson was a mandatory challenger, apart from the head office and Robert Smith.
There you go, isn't it?
Tell me if I'm lying. If I'm lying, sue me.
Roberto, yet again.
Sue me. You've got a lot of Queen's Counsel and a lot of legal eagles on the British Boxing Board of Control. If I am lying, sue me.
Yeah. He's not going to do, is he, Smith?
No, but he's not going to admit he's wrong either, is he? So
it's got to be dealt with because it's not going to go away, is it?
Well, you're not going to let it go.
I'm not going to let it go. Never.
I'll keep mentioning this. We do this every 6 months on here. Oh, and by the way, Russ, I know I've told you this, but I think it's worth telling you. I'm not doing this to suck up. I think it's worth telling you on your channel.
Yeah.
I got a message from Gary Sykes. I think I showed you it. And he just said he really, really appreciates you covering this.
Yeah.
Thanked me, thanked you for all your kind words. And he also thanked everybody in the comments as well. Gary reads the comments. He gets too upset to talk about it, but he reads the comments and he really appreciates everybody's kind words and the fact that you've covered this on here so many times. He loves it, mate. He thinks it's brilliant.
Well, thank you, Gary Sykes, very much. That's nice to be appreciated.
Proper fighter, mate. One you know, I tell you a little story now while we'll talk about Sykes. I won't get emotional. And it was Frank Hopkins used to do a lot of the corners with me. I'd got Gary, there was me, I was head coach, Chris Aston would hand up, and Frank Hopkins, everybody knows Frank Hopkins he just literally cornered everybody there is worth cornering. And I always remember when Gary was on the undercard of it was a Sky show. It was about 6-0 at the time, 7-0. And they were fighting a tough old journeyman called Peter Allen. And it was one of those moments where it was like, he was just on fire. Allen was tough. Sykes was he was going through the repertoire. And as a young coach, I was kind of like shouting too many instructions. And I was, you know, you're stressed and you kind of learn when you get older that these fights are just easy fights, you know, no problem whatsoever. And I remember Frank Hopkins said to me, you know, I'm there stressed up, second round, third round. And I felt this hand on my shoulder and it was Frank Hopkins. And he says, Jew, he's called Jew. Just be quiet for a minute. Just be quiet. And I'm like, all right, Frank, he'd been there and done it. And he said, just sit back. He says, come away. He was middle of the round, you know, halfway through the third round or whatever. Just step back. You know, things stay with you. And he says, just watch. And Sykes was just going through the gears. He was unloading. It was beautiful that night. His feet, his hands were superb. You know, he was a debut champion. And Frank Hopkins just said to me, he goes, isn't Gary a lovely boxer? And that was the first time, you know, I'd stepped away from myself and I realised how blessed I was to be working with a kid that talented, Russell, because it didn't kind of work out for him in the end. But, you know, he won 2 British titles, he won an English title. But it really was, it was a magnificent fighter. He just had a short prime, you know, did Gary. I've seen that before with fighters where...
Do you think that was because of punch output? Because he did used to get some punches out there, didn't he?
I think there was punch output. He had challenges outside of the ring, which are well documented. They're not for me to go into again, but people know he had his demons outside of the ring. He had his challenges, but there was just some nights, and I always remember Frank saying that to me, like, "Don't just watch him and just enjoy it." And he really was a fantastic domestic fighter. And he was also a fighter's fighter because whenever he went to the big shows and you on the undercard or he were head, you know, Gary Sykes, it's a little known fact, you know this, but famous fighters who boxed on a Gary Sykes undercard, Tyson Fury. Yeah. Check it out. Tyson Fury once boxed on Gary's undercard. George Groves, Josh Warrington, and Carl Frampton all boxed on Sykes undercards.
Wow, it's a lot, that, isn't it?
Not bad, is it?
He beat Crawler twice, didn't he?
He beat Crawler twice. We're a gentleman, Anthony Crawler were as well. We're a tough kid, and we're a gentleman he was, and never made excuses, you know, when Sykes beat him. Never made excuses.
He went back to drawing board like a champion, didn't he, Crawler, and come again?
Oh, yeah. Joe stood by him. Joe kept developing him. And ultimately, they were a great team and they did well, didn't they? I'm flashing back a bit now. Probably not what your guys want to hear, but those are the good times in boxing. A lot of dark times.
You know, when you look back, you could say that era, you know, all them coming through. What a match. You could say that were like a goal. Because of Amir Khan coming through, Bellew and all them. That were like, compared to this now, they'll be looked at as superstars in another 20 years, won't they, compared to what we've got now?
And then just such a shame, isn't that? The money wasn't there then, was it? The big arena shows, they weren't, you know, like I said, Sykes had his British title fights in sports centres, and it was such a shame. And then now, if you look at,
when you look back what Joe G's done, you know, with all them, he's put some mileage in, hasn't he, up and
Joe's
down.
He's put some
Wig and all them lot, he's been through the mill, Joe, and he's 30 years solid at it.
He was in the gym all the time. Whenever I went over to gloves, Sykes obviously sparred Stevie Smith a few times, Quigg, guys like that. Amir Khan, sparred Khan over at gloves, sparred Khan over Oliver Harrison's.
It's a job like no other, isn't it? You like
in the gym all the time,
or social services.
We did it all. We did all the gyms. You know, some of the sparring that we used to watch, it was unbelievable. You know, like we'd go to Arnie Farnell's gym 1 week, we'd go to Joe G's gym the week after, we'd be at Steve Maylett's gym, be at my gym, at Dickie's gym. There'd be, as I've said, there'd be Johansson, Sykes, Warrington, Flanagan, all sparring on one night. Jazza Dickens used to come over to Central. Yeah. It's just good kids used to come over to Central. We had some, you know, Maxie Hughes was always at Central with some really, really
Tommy
good
Coyle.
All of them. Tommy Coyle was over all the
Terry
time.
Flanagan.
He used to love it, did Tommy? He said, Jules, can I come over? He's come over without his coach. He'd come over and do some training with us all the way from home.
Hey, Tommy were an hard trainer back in the day, wasn't he, Tommy?
Tommy was a nice kid. I always liked him. I always got on with his dad. Tommy's dad was a nice man. And
Dale Nichols don't get on with Tommy Coyle, you know.
I didn't know that, but it's like I've always said to you, you can only speak as you find, can't you?
They only fell out on social media. Big Dale who comes on. He's all right, Dale. Sometimes you just, I don't know. Sometimes people just fall out, don't they?
It just happens. But as I said, I can only ever speak of Tommy, how Tommy was with me and how Tommy was in the gym. And even before Sykes beat him, you know, we trained together for so many sessions, boxed on the same bill several times. Sykes sparred Tommy, even back in the day when Warrington was a little kid at Wanwell in Lockie's gym. And Tommy used to spar hard. That was Tommy's way. He wasn't a bully. Yeah. He was just a hard sparrer.
Tommy's got miles on clock. Dale takes him.
Yeah. Tommy was he was an emotional guy, was Tommy, and he didn't always think before he spoke. And sometimes he'd be emotional in the gym. He used to get emotional if he'd had a bad spar. But I think ultimately, deep down, he was a good kid. He was a nice kid.
Well, they've got intense beef. Dale Nichols and Tommy Coyle could put it on a Misfits.
I didn't know that.
Tommy, they've got intense beef.
I didn't know anything about that. I got no idea.
Yeah,
I always liked him. I always liked Tommy. Terry Flanagan was a nice kid. You know, he was such a just a quiet lad, down to earth. Quite funny was Terry. Terry was great. Carl Johansson was the quietest of them all. You know, he was so quiet. Was Carl. But honestly, when I opened Central, we had a grand opening, and I always forget we had a good night. So Josh came down, Sean came down. This was when Josh was up and coming, and it was like James Earl came, Steve Conway was there, all my old mates and all my old teammates came. But when we opened Central in I'm going to say 2012. I might be wrong. I always remember, like, you know, there's all those pros there and all the trainers there. We had like an open evening.
Yeah.
And we kind of launched Central Boxing Club. And Carl Johansson came down. And it was weird, you know, because it's like there's all those fighters there and all those trainers there and all those boxing people there. But Carl got the most attention. It was just held in such high esteem, Carl, wasn't it? It was like people
Carl
like
Johansson.
people were saying to me, Jules,
Yeah.
is that Carl Johansson? I'm like, yeah, that's Carl. James Eyre brought his Commonwealth belt, his WBF belt, I think it was at the time. But when Carl came down, it was just like the people like
He was King of Leeds at one point. Carl Johansson.
Carl was great. Carl was proper.
You know, the lad,
helping.
you know what they used to say, don't you? All them lads in Leeds. I know loads of lads over there. They say the last King of Leeds were Vinnie Jones, and then it was Carl Johansson. Now it's Josh Wonnett.
I bet. And Martin Williams and obviously Rick Manners. He had lots of people work with him, but
Yeah.
Martin was always good. He would always bring Carl down to our gym. But I said this to you before, and your guys will. But the sparring was intense, and there were times when Carl would let
him and Sykes should pay for that sparring, wouldn't you?
Oh, it was
Sykes
unbelievable.
and Johansson.
Yeah, they actually they sparred before the fought, and then they sparred loads of times after. And even there were times when Carl would let his hands go, and even when he just lost half of his pace, and he wasn't quite the formidable fighter after Gary beat him that he was before. But sometimes he'd just let a shot go, and he'd just miss. He'd be sparring Josh Warrington, and he'd swing a massive overhand Johansson right, and he'd just miss Josh, and Josh would go, oh, like that. He'd like, if that had hit me, I'd have just been out. And it was just like, people were so intimidated by Carl's power, you know. It really could. He was such a short puncher, you know. He'd let little short shots go.
Yeah, listen, Kelly Maloney did all right out of Carl Johansson.
A lot of people did.
Let me tell you, a lot of people dined out on Carl Johansson in Leeds. Ask anybody.
And I'll tell you who didn't. Martin Williams. Martin Williams really looked after Carl at the end of Carl's career. He stayed at, Martin won't mind me saying that Carl stayed at his house a lot and he helped him out a lot. Martin Williams was a guardian angel for Carl Johansson, mate. There are good people in boxing. There are people who don't want pain.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Martin was a gentleman, mate. He was a gentleman.
Yeah, that Leeds scene, you know, you always thought it'd have gone bigger, wouldn't you? Because they had Henry Wharton, didn't they, at one point, didn't they?
It's huge,
Carl Johansson, Josh Wonnett, Manners brothers, didn't they? And that, you know, Leeds were like, people always say, like Adam Smith, Liverpool's a hotbed. I don't think Liverpool's any better than Leeds as an hotbed for boxing. Yeah, they probably have more world champions than that.
Just made more noise, didn't they? They just made more. They had higher profiles, and if you look at all
Crawford Ashley.
But if you look at all, some of these guys were pre-social media. But if you look at the fighters you've listed, there were good fighters, but they weren't.
Crawford Ashley going in with Michael Nuns, like Billy Joe taking Canelo on, isn't it? Or Rocky Field.
There weren't great speakers outside of boxing, were there? That's the thing. There weren't these.
Oh, there were no social media, were there?
No social media, and there were Crawford Ashley, like a humble guy, just like a humble guy, kept himself to himself. He had a right hand and a left hook, what smash a brick wall down.
Ask Dennis about when he seen Crawford Ashley warming up for Clinton.
I've seen Crawford hit the pads warming up in Hull.
Dennis's arse were falling out. In first 2 rounds, he smashed Clinton's face, and did you see where he did?
He had
straight through his face, his cheekbone, and he straight through.
Yeah, but he used to go to his gym a couple of times. I used to take Sykes down there in the early days.
Great fight, that, wasn't it?
He did a bit of work with Femi Faintola really early on, did Crawford, and he had a gym in Dewsbury, boxing. We used to train down there because we, you know, when we left Keith's, we'd know where to train. So we did a few sessions at Crawford's, and Crawford was huge for a light heavyweight. I'll chat to him, and his shoulders were like
massive puncher, wasn't he?
Devastating puncher.
Massive.
I mean, you mentioned, you know, obviously he fought Virgil Hill, but if you look at Crawford,
Michael Nunn, man, when he was
Michael second to none was just, I mean, the
timing of him.
I'm not suggesting that I've ever beaten Michael Nunn, but to boil Crawford down to 12 stone, I don't know how he did it.
I don't.
To cut a leg off or something, he was absolutely the biggest light heavyweight I've ever seen in my life was Crawford Ashley.
Yeah, yeah. And do you know what? Crawford Ashley fighting Michael Nunn would be like it today. It'd be like a massive fight. None would be massive now, wouldn't it? None.
Anybody who's there's certain masterclasses and there's certain performances in boxing, you know, that just stay with you forever. And this isn't, by the way, just rose tinted glasses. Anybody who's not seen Michael Nunn against Frank Tate should just watch it. I mean, if you really want to appreciate Michael Nunn. So Frank Tate was a Olympic gold medalist, wasn't he? He was the
World champion as well, wasn't he?
IBF middleweight champion. He was undefeated. And he beat Michael Alargide for the title. Frank
A few people, Frank Tate, didn't he?
Knocked out Simpson, didn't he? So Frank Tate was a good fighter. He
Yeah.
was a good, formidable world champion. And of course, he fought Michael second to none. I'm going to get the date wrong, and I'm going to say it was 88, but I might get the year wrong. But anybody who's not seen Michael Nunn against it, there's certain performances that always stick with me.
Yeah.
And perfection, just boxing 101, boxing perfection. There was Michael Nunn beating Frank Tate, Donald Curry beating Colin Jones, Marvin Hagler beating Tony Simpson, and Ray Leonard beating Dave Boy Green. You know, when you just sometimes see the best on the best night,
Yeah.
making fight like Hagler made Tony Simpson look like just an average fighter, didn't he?
Yeah.
And Tony Simpson was everything but an average fighter. Don Curry made Colin Jones just look like nothing, just like a novice.
And Colin Jones were no mug. He'd done Kirtland Lang, who done Duran.
Yep, and he had two absolute squeaker fights, didn't he, against Milt McCrory for the world title. He was unlucky not to become world champion. And then you look at great fighters. So anyone who wants to check it out, check out Michael Nunn against Frank Tate, and it's one of my five favorite boxing performances. Is that it's just perfection. Nunn's footwork, his hands, his movement, switching up and down, drop Tate with a savage looping left bolo shot to the body, right under the kidney. Absolute perfection.
Yeah, fantastic fighter, wasn't he?
You see, this is the thing, you see, when I talk about boxing, it's that there's just things about it where I always think, wow, this is great memories. And it's just such a shame that I don't hold it in the esteem that I used to. It might be a youthful thing as well. It might be a teenage thing.
Terry made a good point a few months ago. He said some of these fighters today, you know, like they say, for instance, light heavyweight division, I think you're on about that. Could we go in and sitting with people, you know, like Clinton Woods, Crawford Ashley, you know, people like that, John Conte, go speak to these people.
Absolutely.
Who've been there and been to, well, you know, and on their wavelength.
If you're thinking you have an hour talking to John Conte and you talk to him about his, you know, how did you used to get fit? How did you used to, you know, because it was a bit of a party animal, but what did you do in your camp? You know, how did you refine your skills?
He never put a lot of weight on Conte, did he?
His skills are off the chart, weren't they? But I think Terry's got a really good point there, because you know, how did you prepare against this guy? You know, if you were me, John, and you were fighting this guy, what would you do? What would you look out for? And it's one of those things in boxing, we don't do a lot of sharing, do we?
Yeah.
And that is one of the things that myself and Steve Maylett used to do quite a bit. So we were friends, we spent a lot of time together in gyms together. And Steve Maylett and I would always share ideas. You know, Terry'd have a fight.
He did well with Terry Flanagan, didn't he?
Very, very well did Steve. He'd have a fight coming up. Sykes would have a fight, and we'd just ring each other and we'd just chat for a little bit. And Steve would say, Jules, do us a favour. Watch that progress. Let me know what you think. Let me know. Just give me your view. And then I'd say, all right, yeah, have a little look at Johansson for me, Steve. Let me know what you think. And we used to share ideas, but for some reason, boxing coaches and fighters don't want to seem to to learn off each other, do they?
You think it's a territorial thing, Julian?
Could be a territorial thing. It could be an ego thing, a mindset thing. I don't know, but two heads are always better than one, aren't there? And I always like to believe when I've been to other gyms, you can always learn a little bit of something off a boxer or off a coach. You can, even if it's just like one tiny little thing you remember. I don't think anybody's that great that they can't pick up something off somebody else. And I used to love talking to other coaches. I used to love going to Gleason's in New York, and when I went over to Gleason's, I've been a couple of times.
And the Atlas there.
Atlas wasn't there when I went, but I spent all day there. So Hector Roca was there, Joey Gamachi was there. Gamachi was a former champion, but he was a top coach. Hector Roca trained everybody, and I just spent loads of time. Just like they knew I was a coach in England. I was training Sykes at the time, but it was only on his way up. And they're just so accommodating and so nice. And you get talking to people. Vivian Harris was there when I went over there. He was training Oleg Maskarov, who he beat Asim Rahman. He was there sparring one day. Augie Sanchez, who ended up getting killed. Augie Sanchez was there. They're just always good fighters and good trainers in there. And I just think you should always want to learn. You should be just trying to soak up as much as you can in boxing. And I think Terry's right, but for some reason, people like to think I know everything. And I always remember, and some people thought I was crazy. So when Sykes was fighting Buckland, John Murray had beaten Gary Buckland. I'm talking about the after prize fighter. So Murray had beaten Buckland. Now I had to go to, it was maybe 6 weeks before the Sykes-Buckland fight. I had to go to the States. I had a week where I was in America, and that was obviously work-related. And I rung Joe Gallagher up. Joe, remember this? And I said to Joe, you obviously trained John Murray when he beat Buckland. So you had a game plan. You studied Buckland. Can I send Sykes over to you for a week? Can he, I got someone to take him over. Can I send Sykes over because I'm off to America for a week? It's not ideal. It's in the middle of an 8-week camp. And I had a friend of mine, Stuart, who did PTs with Gary, let's just say the Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And he went over to Joe G's on the Tuesday and the Thursday. And Joe worked with him. Joe gave Gary a little bit of time. He had him working on certain combinations. Now, what I did then, that would be alien to anybody else. Can you imagine? Imagine Ben Davison saying, "I'm going to send so and so over to train with Mark Tibbs." They wouldn't do it, would they?
No.
Joe, remember, and I sent Sykes over, and people going, "What you sent Sykes over just to train with Gallagher for?" So it's probably the best thing for Gary. I'm working away. He couldn't be in any better hands, and he's going to be training with a coach who not only is a top coach, but he's trained one of his fighters to beat Gary Buckland. So why wouldn't I do that? But unfortunately, in boxing, people have got egos and they won't do that type of thing. And what's Joe going to do? Is he going to try and take Sykes off me?
Yeah. Well, people are paranoid, aren't they, nowadays? Aren't they?
Paranoid and people are like that, aren't they? And ultimately, if you're with a fighter who wants to move on anyway, then let him move on. Why would you want to be with somebody who won't want to be with you? But people don't like sharing ideas. But me and Steve Maylott were always doing it, always sharing ideas, always soaking up information from
isn't that what it's about? Isn't it? You're trying to better your trade and that you learn your craft.
You're trying to be a better coach, and you're trying to make your fighter better.
Do you think we're being harsh on Joshua for going around all these coaches and trying to pick stuff up as a fighter?
I don't know what's being said, but what I do know is
not the done thing, is it though?
It's not the done thing, but if he can get 1% improvement from working with this guy, 1% from working with that, like I've always said, I don't think
there's a cliche though, isn't it? That.
Yeah, but I don't think there's an issue with fighters moving around to different managers, to different trainers. If they want to do it, that's fine. What I have an issue with is two things. I have an issue with people poaching. You know the ones.
Yeah.
The inbox, the message, if you need anything, gives a shout. So I have an issue with people poaching. And I have an issue with fighters going to work with new coaches, not even having the balls or the decency to tell the coach they're moving on. That's what I have an issue with. If you're going to move on to another coach, you sit down with your coach and you say, look, appreciate everything you've done for me. I'm going to be looking to move on. I feel it's time for a change. There's just a way you do things, isn't there?
Yeah.
That's what I have an issue with. And, you know, I think it was, obviously, he's, God rest his soul, I think Oliver Harrison, I think it was Amir Khan, and Oliver Harrison didn't even know he'd left him.
Yeah. That was horrible when that happened, wasn't it?
You don't do that. You don't read in the newspaper the day after that I've gone to work with Freddie Roach. You don't do that. You have a conversation with that guy. That's what you do. So that's the only issue I've got. AJ, whoever, work with whoever you want if it's right for you. But there's a way that you do things, isn't there? And you don't do it behind people's back. But there's nothing worse than
that bringing them in up there at the EIS. That was a bit smelly, wasn't it? It was a bit like when Liverpool brought Houllier in to help Roy Evans. It was smelly, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't like that. I just think there's a way to do business. But if you want people to do business a certain way, then boxing's the wrong sport, isn't it? Because it's dirty on every single level, isn't it? But there are good people in boxing as well.
Yeah, there are, mate. But yeah, I didn't agree with that. I didn't agree with that. We'll finish off on this then. Benavidez, Andrade.
That's a good fight, isn't it?
Yeah.
I always.
Is he swerved in Benavidez? People are saying he's a swerved man.
I think Andrade is he's just another one of those fighters who skill set, got a great skill set, but he's never had that breakthrough fight, has he?
No.
Never, and you always like, why is that? Inactivity.
Not in him, is it? He's not got the devil in him, has he?
And that's exactly it. You know, when he beat Liam Williams, didn't he? And obviously he beat Brian Rose, I think that was back in the day. But he always looks to be a fighter who's more capable of doing more things. Yeah. But as you've said, he's for one reason or another, he's not had the breakthrough fight. And obviously the Benavidez fight's a good fight, but some fighters just seem to go a whole career without having that big breakthrough fight. And then when it comes, it just comes a little bit too late for them.
Yeah. Not like Derek Chisora, though, is it?
Hi, Del Boy.
He still keeps chugging on, doesn't he, Del Boy?
People still love him, don't they? People still mob him whenever he's at these big shows.
He's a Toyota Land Cruiser, isn't he, with 300 thou on clock, just keeps going.
Keeps going, doesn't he? He's look, the reality is he'll pay a price for this at some point, won't he? And it's that trade-off, the fame, the money, the addiction to boxing.
I think it's the fame in it for Derek, isn't it now, isn't it?
But if you look at Riddick Bowe now and you look at guys like who have had too many beatings, it's like, you know, CTE and, you know,
Riddick Bowe, the man that did 150 million.
Honestly, like brain injury, and see every boxer suffers damage. There's just different levels of damage. It's an unsaid thing, but everybody comes out of boxing with something what's not great. You know, whether it's arthritis because of all the breaks, the brutal regime you've put your body under, or whether it's different levels of brain injury, memory loss. You know, you're getting punched in the head, brain cells die. They don't grow back. So everybody leaves boxing with different levels. But when you look at the Terry Norrises now and the Riddick Bowes and the guys it's dreadful, isn't it? It's awful.
Well, and
it doesn't hit you tomorrow, does it? I'm not suggesting Derek Chisora will have problems with his health, but I'm saying he could. But if Derek Chisora, you play back him talking 15 years ago, then 10 years ago, and 5 years ago, and today, and put it next to each other.
Yeah.
If Derek Chisora has suffered any damage in boxing, we won't know in 2 or 3 years. It's only when in 10 years, 15 years' time, we'll know.
He's dribbling now, isn't he? Bless him.
He's not the most coherent, is he? Let's put it that way. He really isn't. There's very few fighters get away with it. There are boxers now, and I'm not going to mention them. One of them fought a couple of weeks ago in a world title fight. You listen to that guy now. Doesn't sound the same as he did 10, 15 years ago.
No, I don't.
And it's someone I know. Yeah, doesn't sound the same at all.
Right. Okay. Well, listen, thanks for coming on, Julian. They've had a 4-parter. You're a gentleman.
Absolutely.
You
Thanks
take
for listening,
care.
mate.
Cheers,
Have a good
pal.
evening. But what's left of it? Cheers, Russell.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Cheers, buddy.
Well, that was Julian. I hope you've enjoyed it this evening. It's my birthday in 12 minutes. Pop, bang on that one, eh? Celebrating with my dogs. Okay. Go on, peace out. Thanks for liking and subscribing and leaving a comment. Booyaka.